This is episode 2 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Let's get into it. We are literally 2 seconds into this episode, and we already have a giant naked man with a giant naked wiener just flopping around the screen. Game of Thrones loves a naked man. Why are all these naked men just walking around Westeros? They don't have decency laws in Westeros. You can just be naked walking around like it's nothing. No. I'm sure the faith of the seven would not approve. I wasn't prepared to see hairy nipples, open gashes, and uncircumcised penises. So we're basically getting a montage of all the good times Duncan used to have with his old knight. And this is quite a change from the first episode because all the flashbacks we got in that one was just him getting slapped up, beat up, thrown around. That man didn't care about him. Okay, I guess we're getting like a fuller story now. There were good times and bad times. So Duncan was actually telling these stories to some members of House Tyrell, and they had no clue who he was talking about. Egg called him a shit knight. You were a squire for a shit knight. Okay, so now the Targaryens are coming in, and Egg looks nervous. I know why he's nervous because, I went and spoiled the story already, but I won't spoil it for you guys. I'll let you figure out what happens. Okay, so we just met Baelor Targaryen and Maekar Targaryen. They're dragonless Targaryens, so still Targaryens, but a Targaryen with no dragons, that's like a KFC with no chicken. I don't know which Targaryen that was, but he mistook Duncan for a stable boy and thought he would like put the horses up for him. Duncan is like, that is not my job. And he's like, okay, well, get me some wine and a pretty wench. Where's the hoes at? And then Duncan's like, sir, I'm not a hoe wrangler. I'm a knight. And that unnamed Targaryen just looked him up and down and said, huh, they let anybody be a knight these days. So Duncan just met two of the King's Guard, and one of them comes from a family of crabbers in Duskendale. And Duncan got a little inspired because how does somebody who comes from a family of crabbers, very much lowborn, elevate to such heights as the King's Guard? Does that mean Duncan could potentially be a King's Guard? Who knows? Are they foreshadowing something? Ooh. So Duncan is eavesdropping on Baylor's conversation. And then this girl, I don't know her name, but she's somebody's daughter. She comes in and tells him that the prince's son is missing. That's a huge deal. Who is the prince's son and where did he go? Where is he? Okay, so Duncan was able to win the favor of Baylor, I believe it was. I'm not sure which one is Baylor and which one is Maekar, but one of them is the king and one of them is the hand of the king. The hand of the king is the nice one. The king is not so nice. But Duncan, he got in the good graces of the hand of the king, and they're letting him participate in the tourney. So good for him. So Dunk and Egg just watched one of the plays. Egg asks one of the actresses about the giant puppets they use, and she tells him that her uncle makes the puppets and she just paints them. And then Duncan remembers that the Targaryens told him he needs his own sigil because he's not blood related to Sir Arlen, that was his old knight. So he has to get his own sigil. So he's going to have the actress repaint his shield and make his own sigil. Dunk and Egg are drinking some beer, having a chat, and then Lionel Baratheon pulls Duncan into a game of tug of war. They're all playing tug of war. Lionel then abandons the game to go get a drink and then comes back and, leads them all to victory. That was a fun little scene. Duncan is able to get himself some armor made, and then he's talking to Egg, and he's telling him that if he becomes champion of this tourney, maybe a big house will take him in as a knight. He's like, maybe I can even be a knight for House Targaryen. And Egg is telling him the Targaryens would never bring on a hedge knight. He then tells Egg that the crabber from Duskendale, he comes from a family of crabbers and he's in the King's Guard. And then Egg tells him that the Crab Man's family owns half the crab thingamabobs in Westeros. And Duncan's wondering how Egg knows this, and he's just like, I like fishing. Something is suspicious going on here. So the tourney is starting. We're having a joust. And right off the bat, I see a lot of familiar sigils. I see Hightower, I see Tully, I saw Baratheon, I see Targaryen, of course. We see Prince Valar getting ready to joust. He's like the fan favorite. So let's see if he lives up to the hype. This is a dangerous sport. Nobody should be doing this. So as Duncan is watching the joust, it looks like he's getting PTSD. And then we fast forward to after the joust, and we see Egg playing with his sword, saying, Die, you Blackfire bastards. And if you don't know the Blackfires and the whole Blackfire rebellion, yeah, it's a lot of Easter eggs just sprinkled into this. You got to really know your Game of Thrones lore to catch all the references. And the episode ends with Duncan lamenting the life of Sir Arlen. You know, he wasn't remembered by any of like the high nobles in Westeros. He never won a tourney. He was nobody's champion. He lived under a hedge, hence him being a hedge knight, and he died on the side of a muddy road. Is that going to be Duncan's destiny? I guess we'll have to keep watching and find out. But that's the end of this review. You know, let me know how you felt about it. Like, comment, subscribe, share, and y'all know the rest. Thank you for watching.